Welcome to another video of Now I Get It. I am without a camera guy today right now, so it's just me, and I'm trying to get information out there about the pros and cons of everything. So that's why I started this YouTube channel, is Now I Get It. You can say you get the pros and cons of everything. So today's discussion is about nourishing our bodies. So what does that look like to actually nourish our bodies? Well, when we look it up online, we're just inundated with diets, and whether it's keto or vegan, whatever it is, we're inundated with these ideals of all the pros of these diets. If you do this, you're gonna lose weight and you're gonna detox and you're gonna be amazing. Like it's overwhelming how many diets there are. The diet industry itself is, $1 million, maybe $1 billion. I don't know. You guys know it's overwhelming. So I wanted to bring you some cons and also allow you to kind of reset how we think about food. So the first con is that, even when you're trying to heal or lose weight or put on muscle mass, when you're looking up online as far as diets or nourishing plans or nutrition plans, whatever you want to call them, there's only the pros. There aren't any cons about it. So the second thing is our Western mentality. We, at least for this video, if you will, please, just step out of the mentality of all food is chemical compounds and processes. Let's just flip the switch, okay? So for thousands of years, mankind has asked the question, will this, what I'm eating, give me more energy than what it's taking, right? So when they're choosing plant food or meat food or whatever it is, that was essentially the question was, is this going to give me more energy than the stress it causes me to digest it? And if we think of it that way, then all food is bringing balance. And in also thinking of it that way, you see there's not really one right diet for everybody. All of the ideals of nourishing our bodies are constantly with that mentality, at least the way that I approach it is this going to be giving them more than what it's taking? Because what I need when I'm a nursing mother in my 20s is very different than what I need when I am a 60-year-old woman and not nursing and no longer having children. So, and it's also very different than if I'm trying to lose weight or if I'm trying to put on muscle mass. All of those things are going to have different variables of how I'm looking at it. But in the end, the one question is this going to give me more than what it's taking? Is this going to give me more energy than the stress to process it? So from there, we get into plant matter, which is not on there yet because it's before that. But so the next thing is plant matter. So when you look up anything about plant matter, you're going to hear the following three things. You're going to hear about phytates, you're going to hear about lectins, you're going to hear about oxalates. And when you get into oxalates, you're going to delve down this road up to thyroid health and Hashimoto's. And here's the thing. I have helped many clients with Hashimoto's and thyroid issues. And that does not mean that they have to take out all high oxalate foods. It does not mean that they cannot eat cruciferous vegetables. It goes into how we are processing things, how we are looking at food, what food choices we're making, of what kind of version of that food we're taking in. So no, all plant matter is not off limits for diets. All food is good and nourishing, and especially when we look at it as bringing balance, right? So then the next thing is meat. So we go from plant to the other end of the spectrum, which is meat. And when we're thinking about meat, you have the same thing where people can say it causes inflammation, it causes stress markers. Yeah, depending on how you're choosing it, depending on how it's raised, depending on how it's been butchered even, all of these things can cause stress markers. So yes, I agree with that, but that doesn't mean that as a whole food group is literally off limits or bad. The next thing is, again, going over, I'm going to do it visually. From here, for my visual people, from here with Western mentality to here. All of mankind for thousands of years has realized what we remember learning from elementary school, that food begins with the light cycle. Literally the sun shines, it gives energy or frequencies, whatever you want to call it, electrical charges to the plant matter. The plant matter then gives that to the animals or to us. So we're either we're eating essentially the light cycle from plant matter or the light cycle from animals, or sometimes from both. We could be eating it from both. So when we think of it in that capacity, we're literally light creatures. We're literally eating the light cycle, and that's how we get these charges in our body. So from that, I'm gonna flip again, and we are going to finally go to the board. So when we're looking at the fact that we are constantly taking in energy from the sun, either through plant and or meat, the other thing to consider is we're not just taking it in that way and being fed internally by nourishing ourselves, we're actually sent signals from the sun itself. So what that entails, and I will link it, is that we actually have light cell receptors all over our skin, not just our eyes. Those light cell receptors send signals to our internal villi and our enterocytes. I guess for visual people, I'll write it, but like your stomach lining is like this. And then from there, you have villi, and they kind of like reach out and grab the food. And that's why, like, if you have leaky gut, there's breaks in it, and there'd be breaks right in here. But let's say that you have no leaky gut, and you're looking at what your diet's doing. So we're not even gonna go down that road. There are things called enterocytes, and they have a 24-hour life cycle. So they start right down here, they come up here, and when they come up here and you eat food and it's passing by, they produce enzymes, which the way I wrote it doesn't look very happy, but we'll make enzymes look happy. That kind of looks happier. I don't know. Anyway, they produce enzymes. Those enzymes are literally needed to break down whatever food we're eating. So, and again, go back to my magnesium video. You need magnesium to be producing the enzymes, super crucial. But those enzymes are needed to break down the food. And when we are taking in light from the sun, it has to do with our circadian rhythm and when to produce those enzymes. And also it even tells us which enzymes to produce. So in the winter time, if you are more up north and further from the equator, it's going to send signals that you actually need more fats, things that are going to hold you for a longer amount of time instead of the high carbs. Because in the winter, you're not running and jumping and gardening and outside a lot. You're inside and you're still. So you need those fats to sustain you. Whereas if you're closer to the equator, the light cycle is going to be very different. It's going to be more like the summer light cycle, and it's going to be sending signals that you need more carbs to keep going all day. So being out in the sun is crucial for our body, and having our skin exposed to some extent, even if it's just your eyes or whatever, try to being what we've been doing for thousands of years. I'm not saying go out there and try to get skin cancer, but at the same time, those light cell receptors need to be fed for us to know which enzymes to produce in which amounts and when. So the next thing is bacteria and enzymes. Okay, so like 100 years ago, you could not get pineapple or avocados in Michigan. Like, it didn't happen, right? So if you were to go and get, let's say summertime in Michigan, an apple off the tree, that apple has bacteria on it. That bacteria produces enzymes. Those enzymes, again, that's what breaks down food. So we're eating foods that are not local, and it's not just a slogan. We're eating foods where it's not local and it's not in season. The problem with that, and there's many, but one of the problems with that is that the food we're eating does not have bacteria on it as far as beneficial bacteria. And so it does not have on it or in it what it needs to help support our body and give less stress to our body by producing the enzymes for us. So now what you find is that almost everybody in the Western culture is taking digestive enzymes, and they're also taking prebiotic and probiotic supplements because they're missing the enzymes and they're missing the bacteria. Although I guess I should switch that, the bacteria and then the enzymes, because it starts with bacteria. But yeah, so eating local and in season is not just a slogan. It's not something that I just say. It really is delving into 101, what our body does with the light cycle, light cell receptors, and our enzyme production of our body to remove the stress from our body. So if you're eating avocados and you're in Michigan, I'm sorry to pick on Michigan, our family's from Michigan, but if you're eating avocados in Michigan, one, they would never grow there, and that doesn't mean don't eat them, but two, they would only be super in the summer even if they did, and by the time it gets to you, those things are gone. So if you're eating them, great, they're delicious. I super love avocados and guacamole, I really do, but know that you are putting stress on your body every time that happens because you're not eating close to what your body is getting signals that it should be eating at that time or in that location. That doesn't mean that diet alone is going to stress you. It's just, that's one way to lessen it. So what we're discussing in this is just ways to lessen the stress from our diet 101 to what we had like 100 years ago. 100 years ago, that wasn't even an option. An avocado in Michigan was not an option. So they weren't having to supplement with digestive enzymes and probiotics and prebiotics. So the next thing is, I know everybody's gonna, this is a heated topic, I would say. So the next thing is Roundup with glyphosate. Okay, so if you don't believe me that this is an issue, please look up the studies that have been done and even the court cases that like people have won millions of dollars because they literally have gotten cancer because of Roundup and glyphosate. So Roundup is a pesticide, an herbicide, and it is used a lot for, gardening and that kind of stuff to get rid of weeds or what they call weeds. Most weeds are actually nutritional, but anyway, Roundup has a chemical compound in it called glyphosate. Glyphosate is made up of a bunch of heavy metals and that are toxic in their composition. What they were created to do and what they have been doing for the past 50 years, we are the third generation of this being sprayed on things. What they were created to do is desiccate or dry out the wheat and other plants all at once. So you could instead of having a part of the wheat ready and to harvest, you have all the wheat ready to harvest. So, first generation, whenever you're having stress on the body, it may not be that bad. Second generation, you may start noticing it. Third generation, everybody all of a sudden has gluten intolerance. Well, yeah, some of that may be genuine. I say this as someone who I say this as someone who literally has genetic testing that proves I have celiac and gluten intolerance, and yet I can eat wheat when it's at times because I've healed my gut, and when it's ancient grains and organic. So not everybody has gluten intolerance. All grains are not the devil. No offense, but they're really not. But by third generation, we have inflammation markers that are coming on to this. So I am actually going to get to this part now. I don't know, eventually maybe I'll make movies where it looks like super awesome, but right now this is what I got. So, so this is what I call to clients the Trojan horse issue. So for 50 years now, your body is taking in grains and these little lectins and wheat or whatever it is that these grains are. And these grains have been heavily sprayed. So they are full of glyphosate. And so your body takes this in and it says, oh, that's delicious. Oh, wait, that's really upsetting to my body. That's actually causing my actual internal, your intestines and your villi and to actually break down. So it not only desiccates the plants, and you can research this as well, or I can post links. It's proven to desiccate the human intestinal lining. So it's not just desiccating plants, it's desiccating our lining of our gut. And if you do that, this is what happens. You no longer have enzyme production because your villi are broken, and so is your intestinal lining. There's permeability or leaky gut. So these are coming in and they're not just desiccating the plants and the plant matter. By third generation, they are super desiccating our guts, and they have been for 3 generations. But now it's compounded. So that's the next question, is why is this compounded? And that's when we get to the Trojan horse thing. The Trojan horse thing is, if you let in one Trojan horse, you guys are essentially going to be like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, we let in one Trojan horse, we need to do better. You let in another Trojan horse, that's another generation. You're super learning, okay, wait a second, this is causing inflammation. This is the 3rd generation of letting in these Trojan horses, of these foods that we think, wow, that's super great, it's delicious, it's nourishing in certain capacities for our body, but then there's damage being done by letting it in. And so our body is now reacting with inflammation markers much stronger than what it did generations ago. So I hope that analogy makes sense. But The next thing is the plant matter has also been bred for high lectin count. And so the lectin is the outer shell. Like in the Bible, it says they separate the wheat from the chaff. So what happened is they would like harvest the wheat, and it would begin to sprout. And when it sprouts, it releases and breaks through that outer shell. Like when you have a seed, you have a shell on the outside. That's the lectin matter. So when you harvest it, it would lay on the ground, and then they would let it sit. It would sprout, and then that sprouting itself would actually break down the lectin and break it open. Now they have bred it in such a way that the lectin is not easily broken down. They have purposely chosen over the last 50 years the ones that have the strongest, thickest lectins. So that's even more digestive distress for our body, because our body has to not just break down lectins that aren't sprouted, but are also sprayed and are way thicker and harder to break down. So again, this doesn't mean plants can't be eaten. It's just, this is 101 of thinking of things when we're nourishing our body. So the next thing is preparation. So yeah, that's when we get into the preparation of food. And actually, you know what? Before we get to preparation, I want to go back a second. So one of the arguments I get from clients a lot on both sides, like plant and meat, is what about the mucus? Doesn't this produce mucus? Okay, if something is producing mucus, like put your food in a Ziploc bag, okay? If you're buying bread at the store and it has the chemicals in it to where it doesn't age and it doesn't mold, that's dead food, right? So your body has to figure out what to do with that. But most food has bacteria or enzymes on it, and those bacteria produce enzymes. Those enzymes then break it down. And what happens is the food begins to mold, and it kind of looks like a mucousy film. Like if you leave vegetables in your fridge too long, you'll see it, it's nasty, it stinks. If you leave meat out too long, you'll see it, it's nasty, it stinks. This does not mean that these things produce mucus in your body. This means that these things are living foods that are being broken down. So now to go back to preparation, if you're still with me. I'm trying to do the pros and cons of everything, and that's hard to do in one video. So preparation. We no longer prepare foods the way we used to. For thousands of years, mankind has already lived with this, like the light cycle, the bacteria, the enzymes. They had no spraying. They hadn't had things bred for high lectins, and they prepared the foods that were local and in season, and they prepared those in fat matter and plant matter and meat matter, like as a whole, right? So if you were around the equator, you're going to be using a lot of coconut fats, coconut milk, and that's how you're going to be breaking down that plant matter. That can be distressful to your body and cause inflammation. If you, and also they would have dairy, and if you're anti-dairy, I get it. I get what you're saying. They would even use coconut milk. They had some kind of fat that would help break down the actual fibrous material of plants. They have. And so if you're anti-dairy, you can do coconut milk, those kinds of things. If you're looking at thousands of years of humanity, they have prepared food with fats. It's not just been fibrous plant matter. Sometimes the fats were raw, sometimes they were cooked like coconut milk, sometimes it was raw like coconut milk, sometimes it was raw meat and raw fats, and sometimes it was cooked meat and cooked fats. But those fats help break down the fibers in the material that you're eating. And so they would sprout grains, and they would allow, like I said, the wheat to separate from the chaff. So the leptin count and the oxalates and the phytic acids and the phytates were cooked down, and they weren't as big of an issue. So that's the last thing to think about, is the preparation. The last thing, which I would like to say, is I love Chinese medicine. I love the work I do. So shout out to this. When we think of food as balance, right, then we are able to realize, and oh, you know what? This is scientifically proven too. When we smell things, we produce enzymes to start breaking that food down too. So sit with your food, savor your food, pray over your food, enjoy your food. Like Every culture throughout humanity has used food as a point of celebration and as something to be enjoyed. So you can also be super hyper rigorous and hyper vigilant about your food, and just in doing that, your body is refusing what it should be doing, even in producing these enzymes. You're not taking the time to smell it. You're not taking the time when you sit for your salivary glands to produce the saliva to help break down the food. So sit and savor your food. And also, I'm going to hopefully be making a video on this as far as when you're looking at it with Chinese medicine. There are foods that are heating and fueling. There are fire foods, so if you're building muscle, or sometimes they can cause inflammation, right? Fire foods, fire, inflammation. There are foods that you can be using towards detoxing. So you're looking at the water meridian, and in that you're looking at foods that have to do with your kidney and bladder. You're looking at the water element, and so you're looking at the kidney and bladder meridians, and that's things that flush out toxins. So I'd like to make another video. I don't know. We'll see how well you guys like it. So if you like the videos, please love them. Please subscribe, and that way I know I should keep doing this. And now I'm going to go turn the camera off because I've probably talked too long. So now you can say, as far as Nourishing 101, now I get it.